Hello, everyone. Happy Christmas to all of you. I hope that you have some amazing holidays for those that have holidays and celebrate Christmas. And if not, I hope that you have a great time in any case. Give me a sec because I'm listening to myself. Now it should be fixed, I believe. Yes. And yeah, and I wanted to say hello to everyone who's in the chat today. We have many known names here. We have Tech Lead Consulting, we have Pedro Quesada, also Bashar Ganguly, also Jake has been answering questions about Experience Cloud, and I'm really grateful for that. Thank you, Jake, because we are developer advocates, we play with the features, but at the end, the people who are on the field playing with real implementations, with customers, and with like real world problems is you. So you are more than welcome to respond questions on the chat if you know the answer. And then we have also Vinicius and Hong To and Joaquin. Thank you so much, all of you, for joining today, and I hope that you like the chapter. So in today's Code Live, we are going to continue with the topic that we covered last week, which is Experience Cloud. We're going to see two features that one of them at least was developed because of needs of customers that use and have Experience Cloud, but that you can also use in Lightning Experience and the Salesforce mobile app. So it's going to be like a double chapter because we're going to see some Experience Cloud features, but those features, you can apply them also in Lightning Experience. And I will explain like all the details of this. First of all, if you have any problems with the audio, the video, please let me know because I can try to fix them right away. And if not, and everything works fine, then I will continue with the code light today. There was a question on the chat. I'm going to start with that from Pedro. Pedro was asking about overriding Lightning-based components, and this is valid not only for Experience Cloud, but also for Lightning Experience, overriding their styles. And I was saying to Pedro that there is something which are some CSS custom properties available in the Lightning design system that allow you to change the CSS, some CSS properties that apply to the internals of those components, but not everything is exposed. I'm going to show you where that is. And for that, I'm going to show my screen and I'm going to try to find for that. They are called styling hooks, by the way. So CSS custom properties is like the standard name that is used in JavaScript and HTML and CSS. In regular web application development is what I mean. But we call them styling hooks in Salesforce, in the context of Salesforce. And if you come here to the Lightning Design System webpage, here there was a way to see, I think it's called, no, I don't remember the place where it is, but there was a way to see like styling hooks for base components. Here it is. Okay, so in component blueprints, for instance, if you want to check the styling hooks for text area, you come here, and these are all the CSS custom properties that you can use in your CSS file when you are using those Lightning-based components to change their styling. So it's not everything what is exposed, but you have like a good quantity of properties to play with. For instance, Pedro was referring to the tab component. We're going to take a look at it. Here it is. Okay, and if we take a look at the styling hook section, should be here. These are all the CSS properties available that you can use to style your components. Okay, Pedro, try that out and let me know if it works for you. And with that, I'm going to continue talking about today's topic. And today's topic is going to be Light DOM. So Light DOM is a feature that we released for Experience Cloud specifically, but that works also for Lightning Experience because our customers wanted more flexibility in regards to applying global styling and in regards to using global JavaScript libraries. But to understand what's Light DOM and how it works, we need to go back a little bit and start by talking about the Shadow DOM, what it is, and why in Salesforce we have a synthetic implementation of it that we are trying now to migrate to the native one, because all those things are going to have implications on how our Lightning Web Components work and how we can incorporate Light DOM into our Experience Cloud sites. Okay, so we're going to start by explaining what's Shadow DOM and why in Salesforce we have a synthetic shadow and what are the differences with the native one. Okay, so Shadow DOM is a concept of web components. It's not something that Salesforce invented. And Shadow DOM allows you to add like a hidden DOM that is right below one element of your main DOM, right? The structure of elements that represent what you are showing in your web page, but that is encapsulated. So you can imagine this as a way to expand the DOM, your element tree, but enclosing the elements that you include in that shadow DOM into a box that is completely black and that other like styles and JavaScript libraries that are on the page cannot easily access. Okay, as you can imagine, one of the reasons for having Shadow DOM is encapsulation and security, right? Here we have some concepts. So when you add a shadow DOM tree to an element, the element becomes the shadow host. And then we say that that shadow DOM is going to be surrounded by a shadow boundary, which is like the protection that is added to it, so that the CSS styles don't leak into the component and so on. So in the web components standards, the specification, it is determined that to create a web component, like a vanilla web component, you need to add a shadow DOM to that component. And when we started to create Lightning Web Components, the engine, the framework, we wanted obviously to implement that shadow DOM specification and to create our components under a shadow root. However, at that point, some browsers didn't support this specification yet. So the thing that we had to do was to, instead of adopting the native Shadow DOM specification, we created our own synthetic version of it. Okay, so if this is called Shadow DOM, when we are using this spec to create that hidden DOM piece, right? Then what we do is to differentiate that from the regular DOM is that we use another word to refer to the regular DOM, which is light DOM, okay? And this is the feature that we are going to talk about today, the ability to convert my Lightning Web Components into elements that belong to the light DOM and that are not enclosed in that shadow boundary. At the end, what you see in the screen is going to be the same, because when you're using shadow DOM, the DOM is flattened and all the elements are like positioned in the same way, like are interspersed in the way that they are supposed to end up. It's the same, the end result that you will see in the screen. But the implications of this encapsulation and security are different. In vanilla web components, the way in which you create a shadow DOM is this one. So you get the element to which you want to attach the shadow, and then you use a standard function which is attach shadow, and then you can start adding elements to that shadow, okay? But when you create Lightning Web Components, you don't need to do any of this because we do it for you. So we are doing this with the synthetic shadow actually as of today, but our objective is that we move to the native shadow DOM as soon as we can and as soon as supported in all the browsers that our customers use. So we've understand what shadow DOM is. I hope. If not, ask me questions in the chat as always. And we've understood that this shadow boundary is going to encapsulate the internals of your components, right? So in which way? So first of all, it's going to encapsulate the markup. If my component has a shadow root and some elements that are hanging from that root, then I won't be able to do like document dot query select or whatever to find elements that belong to that shadow DOM and that are protected, right? I will need to access them through the shadow root property of my element, and only if the shadow DOM was added in open mode, which is what we do in Lightning Web Components. Then in regards to events, when you fire events from your Lightning Web Component, shadow DOM is the thing that adds security and prevents your events from going up and escape the shadow boundary unless you explicitly specify that, unless you configure your components as bubble and compose, okay? And then in regards to CSS, which is one of the big topics that we are going to discuss today, thanks to that shadow boundary, that protection, the CSS cascading style won't link into your component. This is styles that are defined outside of your component are not going to affect the internals of your shadow boundary protected component, except some properties, because there are some properties that are defined as inherited, and those properties, if you load them as global styles, they do affect your components, but almost all or a big portion of CSS properties won't affect your shadow DOM elements by default, unless you do something for that thing to happen, right? So because Salesforce decided to implement a synthetic shadow DOM, which is really a polyfill for backwards compatibility, these encapsulation benefits are almost true, but there are some slight differences in regards to the case in which we were using the native shadow DOM, okay, which is the future, which is towards we are going on. So, for instance, we encapsulate the markup, but if you have worked with Lightning Web Components, you know that we don't really use this shadow root property except for test, but we use a template property to access the components. The events work a little bit differently, but I'm not going to get into the details today. And the main difference that I wanted to mention is in regards to CSS. So what happens with CSS? With the native shadow, if you load styles into like globally, right, and scoped styles, your native shadow is going to protect the component. However, with synthetic shadow, there is something which is not like 100% well implemented, and CSS global styles, for instance, if you load a global style with a static resource, are going to leak into your component. Okay, that is not how it should work. And when we change the components to use the native shadow DOM instead of the synthetic shadow, your global styles are not going to work anymore. So because of that, we have always said that using global styles was not recommended, especially online in experience on the platform, and also because they can interfere with the Salesforce look and feel. Okay, so said that, native shadow DOM is already here. Okay, so because now, as of today, the majority of the browsers already support native shadow DOM, we want to give customers a migration path for adopting native shadow, and we are starting now, right? There is a feature called mixed shadow mode, which is basically the ability to activate native shadow for your component. I know the name is a little bit confusing because it says mix it, and it says mix it because you can use native shadow in some components and synthetic shadow in some other components and mix them, right? But the feature is basically the ability to activate native shadow for a specific component. Okay, and you can start doing that. That's going to have some great implications for your app. So your app is going to have better performance because your app is going to be aligned with web standard. That polyfill is not going to be needed, and all the renderization of the shadow is going to happen on the browser, not on the app, on the LWC engine itself. And your CSS is going to be correctly encapsulated, okay? Which is the most important point to remember, because when I talk about Lightroom, we are going to make a reference to this, okay? So native shadow DOM is the future, and if you have the chance to start working with it, I recommend you doing it. Okay, so because Light DOM is going to enable some CSS styling, some global CSS styling, but the proper way, not the way that you are being able to do now because the synthetic shadow is not working properly. Because of that, what we are going to do first today is that we are going to change our components to support the native shadow DOM, because this is how they are supposed to be and how they will be in the future. And that way, you are going to understand much better the Light DOM use case later. Okay, I'm going to take a look at the chat to see if there are any questions. So, okay, we have a conversation about styling. Okay, so yeah, so Jake, exactly what you are saying. The first question that we had at the beginning of the code live was about how to override Salesforce styles. And Pedro is saying that you can like inspect a component, see what is the class that Salesforce is using, and use that to override the styles in the builder. But when native Shadow DOM is active, I'm not sure. I don't think so. I don't think that you will be able to do that. So if you can use CSS properties instead, please use them because that would be the best practice. And if not, in the future, you will be able to use global styles, which is like better than overriding Salesforce. Well, for lightning-based components, that's true that you need to override styles. But if you want to do that, that's really a bad practice, I believe, and you will need to do that on purpose, like activating light DOM, because when everything is protected by native shadow, it's not going to be possible to do that hack, I would say. Okay, but let me think about that question, and I will add some comments later regarding like the best recommendation regarding CSS overrides, because I haven't played a lot with Experience Cloud, and I'm afraid I'm maybe not aware of something, but that's my current thinking. Okay, I wanted to say hello to Kenneth Sorensen. Thank you for joining today, and also to Akbar, who's there. Akbar, nice to meet you. Nice to see you, and I hope that we meet at TDX, because Akbar told me that he's going to TDX, Trailblazer DX, the Salesforce Developer Conference. And there are a few questions about tech lead consulting. So he's talking about the refresh view API in LWR Experience Cloud. So we took a look at that in the previous day, and we saw it was available, I believe, for Experience Cloud. No, we didn't see, because there was an issue in the documentation and I didn't get back to you, but I'm going to ask if the refresh view API is available. And if I forget about it, please send me a message and I will ask it for you, Tech Lead Cloud Consulting. And then there is another question, which is, can you explain about server-side rendering in LWR and how it is useful? Yeah, so server-side rendering is currently, I believe, in closed pilot. So this is something that the team is working on, that the LWC team is working on. And I'm not an expert on that topic, but I believe that the main purpose for having server-side rendering is performance, because it's like if you delegate some of the rendering workload to this server instead of having to do that or all that on the browser, and is like if you optimize the way in which your components are loading. There was a session in Dreamforce about it, and the session is scheduled to be published in the Salesforce Developers YouTube channel. We are being a bit late with Dreamforce sessions because we had some internal problems with some personal problems in the team, but hopefully those videos should go out soon, and you will be able to see a video. It was breakout given by Greg Whitwork, and I don't remember the name of the co-speaker, but he was fantastic product manager about this topic. So stay tuned, because we will publish that information in the channel soon. Okay, so not this repo, this one. Okay, so I want to activate a native Shadow DOM in my components so they are protected. How do I do that? So for that, I'm going to show you, this is the documentation, and I have a link to show you for this, which is this one. Okay, there you have. And it's super simple, okay? The only thing that we need to do, this is on the developer preview, but actually the feature has changed a little bit from developer preview to beta. And if you go to the, sorry, not that one, but this link that you can see in the QR code right now, which is this one. I'm going to put it here. Okay, I had it open here. That's fine. Yeah, so the beta, if you go to the Spring 24 documentation release notes, which is available already, you will see that we have changed slightly. And now instead of saying any, what we say is native, okay? So the only thing that we need to do is to copy this and add it to the components for which we want to activate the native Shadow DOM. Again, what we are doing with that is gaining performance, adopting web standards, and fixing that global CSS issue that happened in synthetic shadow. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to activate native shadow for my components. This is going to be one of the components for which I want to do it. And this is the other one, product tile, because we are going to do our examples with these two components, okay? And I'm going to deploy the whole folder. Okay, so with that, our Shadow DOM is supposed to be activated. And I'm going to show you how to see that. So if you take a look at one component with the synthetic shadow in your developer tools, let me make it bigger, you're going to see something like this, right? You don't see like anything special that says shadow root or something like that. Remember that shadow root is like exactly the element from which your components start to hang. But if I refresh the page, now that I have deployed the code for my native shadow, we're going to try to take a look again and see if we see something different. Okay, I don't see anything different. Let me see if something failed. No. Let's do it again. Yeah, there it is. Okay, you see that now here I have something that says shadow root open. This is there because we are using native Shadow DOM. Two considerations for this. In order for this to appear, you need to activate it into the Chrome Developer Tools. There is a setting which is called show Shadow DOM, something like that. Here, show user agent Shadow DOM, and you can activate it. In order to see this, you need to activate it. And the other thing is that this feature is available in Spring orgs, okay? In previous orgs, like in winter orgs, is not available. There is a web page in which you can request a Spring org already, which is this one. I'm showing the QR code there. Okay, this is the pre-release request form. So if you want to play with native Shadow DOM, make sure to come here and request a Spring 24 org, because that's the only way in which you will be able to play with this feature. Okay, so great. We have native Shadow DOM activated. Now we're going to continue talking about Light DOM. Okay, here it is. Fantastic. So now we know what Shadow DOM is. We know that in Salesforce, historically, we've been using a synthetic version of it. And now that most major browsers support native Shadow, we are trying to migrate everything to use native, right? But we said that in some cases, customers have the need to open that shadow DOM, right? Because we saw at the beginning that if we are using shadow DOM in our components, everything is going to be encapsulated, everything is going to be more secure, nothing is going to be able to like style your components unexpectedly, for instance. But in some cases, some specific cases, there is a desire to not have those components uh, encapsulated, because we want like some global CSS libraries or global JavaScript libraries or like third-party JavaScript libraries to play with the elements of our page, okay? And that's the reason we created Light DOM. So Light DOM is basically a feature that allows you to relax that shadow DOM restriction. Basically, what you do when you activate Light DOM is that, let me go back to the first slide, is that instead of composing your components this way, you compose your components in the Light DOM directly. So it's like if you skip all this encapsulation thing and you just create your components with all the elements interspersed in the Light DOM. Okay, this has some security implications, as I mentioned, and like the places in which it's recommended to use it is mainly Experience Cloud, because in Experience Cloud, you are under control of your whole experience, right? But it's something that some customer needed, and we decided to release it. Why is not recommended to use it in the platform? Well, because on the platform, on Lightning Experience, first of all, your components can coexist in the page with components that may come from other providers. For instance, a component that has been downloaded from the Epic chains and so on. Do you want those components to interact with your components? Not really, right? And the other reason is that in Lightning Experience, you are within the Salesforce UI. So for instance, global styling, it's something that is completely discouraged, because you could affect the styles that are part of the Salesforce application, right? So specifically designed for for Experience Cloud. Let me continue with that. Okay, so there are two main use cases. There are more use cases, and I will share with you a blog post that I wrote a few weeks ago about this. But today we're going to focus in these two, because are like the two most important ones. So one of them is I want my markup to be accessible by a global JavaScript library, typically analytics libraries. And second use case, I don't want to have my CSS encapsulated, because I want to have a global CSS library. And this is, again, recommended in Experience Cloud. So with that, let's go to VS Code and let's continue with the demo. So first of all, we're going to play with the first use case. We're going to imagine that we have an analytics library, but that analytics library is something that I have created, which is fake, okay? It's not a proper analytics library. So what I'm doing here is I'm accessing all the elements of my document, which are anchor links and which have the class inspect. Then I'm iterating over those elements, and I'm adding an event listener so that when someone clicks on that element, I'm able to log a message saying that that element was clicked. Okay, this could be the behavior of a fictitious analytic library, right? Something that is able to inspect what people are doing in our web page with our components and our elements. So without Light DOM, this wouldn't work, right? Because the component internals, Lightning Web Components internals, are protected by Shadow DOM, and it wouldn't be possible, so this query wouldn't return any results. However, if we activate Light DOM for a component, then its elements are going to belong to the Light DOM and are not going to be protected, and this query will be able to find them. So what I did was to already upload this as a static resource to my org. Also, I've created a resource loader component because I didn't know, I learned that you cannot use the regular static resource loader that you can use in Learning Experience. You cannot use it in Experience Cloud, and that this is a recommended workaround. So I created this component and I already deployed it to the org. And now what we are going to do is to work in our product tile list component, the one that represents the list of bikes that we have in the system, and our product tile component, which is the one that represents each individual bike. So that analytics library can log when we click on each of the elements. Okay? So, well, first of all, where can I find that information? In the Light DOM documentation. I'm going to show you a QR code that takes you there. Here they explain you everything about Light DOM. There are some considerations to take into account. You should read this in depth before deciding to adopt Light DOM. But here, when I arrive here, I start to see the first instructions to adopt light mode. So if I want to make a component Light DOM enabled, there are two things that we need to do. First, we need to set the render mode in JavaScript file. And second, we will need to set it on the template. I asked why we need to do two things. And they told me it was like a limitation of the LWC engine, and the engineering team had to implement it this way. And that's the reason for it, okay? So what we're going to do is that we are going to enable Light DOM both in my product tile list and my product tile component. And I'm going to copy this directive. And the directive, I need to put it in the HTML file on the template for both components. Okay, there it is. Light DOM enabled for both components. We're going to deploy that. This feature, by the way, is GA, okay? It's GA for is GA for all experiences. And if you want to take a look at the release notes, this is the QR code that you can use. Okay, so we have enabled Light DOM in my components. Now, what I need to do is to load that analytics library so that that library is able to take a look at the internals of my component. And look that the links that I'm inspecting are on the product tile component, but the analytics library, we are going to load it in the parent, right? Because we don't need to load that library into each individual child, okay? And because this component is Light DOM enabled, from the parent, I'm going to be able to see, not from the parent, because I'm going to be able to see these elements from the parent, but also from a library it's loaded globally, as we are going to do through a static resource, okay? So let's go to the parent, which is a product type list component, and we are going to use that resource loader component to load the library. And give me a second because I want to. Yeah, okay. So what we are going to do is we are going to, maybe here, we're going to import from that resource loaded library a load script function that is going to allow me to load that analytics library. Then my analytics library is stored in a static resource, which is called my analytics lib result. So I'm going to load it as well. And then in the rendered callback, which is here is where we are going to load the analytics library so it can add event handlers to any inspect links that are exposed in the Lightstone. Okay, this is what we are going to do. So how do we load that library? So we are going to do load script, very easy. We use that function that we imported from our resource loader, and we use the name that we gave to the static resource that includes the analytics library that we created. But we're going to do this in a more performant and smart way, which is that we are going to load the analytics library only if my products have been loaded in the page, and only if the library was not previously loaded. This is a best practice, okay? To have like a property that stores if the I had the property here because I was playing with this, but I should have added this property now, okay? Which is the property that is going to store is going to tell me if the library was already loaded or not. And something very important. When the library is loaded, we are going to set that property to true so that it doesn't try to load it again. Fantastic. So let's deploy this and let's take a look and see if it works. So we are in or I'm going to Experience Cloud, okay? Which is in the context in which we are using the analytics library. Experience Cloud. By the way, I also learned that there is, so I decided to use a static resource because it is what I'm familiar with, but I learned that there is a way to load resources globally in Experience Cloud sites using the head. And you should probably do it that way, right? Not using a static resource. But I did it that way because I'm more familiar with learning experience development and not Experience Cloud. So here we have our Property Explorer page in LWR. Okay, this is giving me an error. And it's giving me an error because when you convert a component to be Lightstone enabled, then remember that we don't have that shadow root anymore. So if you're going to do a query, you need to fix your queries to do, instead of this.template.querySelector.all, you need to do, oh, I pressed the wrong button. You need to do, come on, here it is. this dot and then query selector all. There is another way to do that, which works for both light DOM and shadow DOM components, and I have that in this blog. This is the blog that I mentioned before. I'm going to show you the QR code that it is. And here somewhere, let me see, maybe if I look for LWC ref, it's going to be easier. Ref, exactly. Here I explain exactly that, okay? That if you use light DOM, you need to switch to this dot query selector instead of using the template, or you can use a method that works both for shadow DOM components and light DOM components, which is that you declare a reference that points to your HTML element, and then you use that reference. This is the same as doing a query selector, but you do this dot reference dot greeting. This is returning me the element that is annotated with that reference. Okay, so that's another possible solution for this. So let's go to again our property explorer page and see if it works. Yeah, it works. And we're going to the preview and we're going to inspect, because that library that I created is doing some console logs. And supposedly, if everything is working on and I click here in one of the elements, I should be able to see some more console logs here. So let's do it. And yeah, it's working. Okay, so this was a fun example, and I hope that it helped you understand one of the possible usages of light DOM, right? Is the possibility of using global JavaScript libraries that access the internals of your components in Experience Cloud. So now let's take a look at the other example or the other use case, most important use case, which is allowing for global styles. So now that I activated native shadow DOM and that that bug that the synthetic shadow has is fixed, if I try to load a global style here, and I'm going to use a static resource again, forgive me, is if I try to do that, these styles are not going to leak into my component, because native shadow is, I mean, if I don't enable light DOM, right? Because the native shadow is going to protect them. But thanks to light DOM, we are going to be able to do that. So for 1 second, we are going to revert this. We're going to deactivate the light mode here, and we are going to or not. Instead of doing it here, what I'm going to do is in the product tile component, I'm going to deactivate light DOM here. So now at the moment, my product tile element should be protected by that shadow DOM, native shadow DOM boundary, right? And in the parent product tile list, we are going to import some CSS, which is stored in a static resource, which is adding some border to every div which class is content. And this is a div that I have in my product tile class, this one here, okay? You see that in my product tile HTML file, in every product tile, I'm declaring a div element that is of class content, okay? And this is what we are trying to change here with that global styling library. So let's do the same. What we are going to do this time, we are going to import load style from C resource loader, and that load style function, I need to also import the static resource. The static resource is called global styling. Global styling. Okay, and then what we need to do is load style. We're going to do it here, for instance, load style for global styling. What this is doing is to load the static resource globally in our Experience Cloud site. And if native shadow is activated and I'm not using like DOM, these styles shouldn't leak into my component. I'm going to deploy everything. And we're going to take a look. So if I refresh this page, I shouldn't see any changes, right? Property Explorer. I did something wrong, so let's review the code. Maybe I didn't call it load style. Oh, okay. Yeah, I know what is wrong. This function is expecting that I pass this. This is because of the resource loader implementation for Experience Cloud. Okay. Great. So let's refresh again. And see what happens. Okay, still I have an error. Why? Let me take a look. So I have, let me see. Okay, I know what's wrong. I know what's wrong. For loading styles in Experience Cloud, I don't need to use a special resource loader, okay? The regular platform resource loader works. The use case, the case in which I need to use a special load script is only for JavaScript files. So let me deploy. Yeah, thank you, Ashish. Ashish told me that. Good catch. You know, when you are talking at the same time than that taking a look at code or seeing code or writing code, you don't see anything. It's crazy. Okay, let's take a look now. And I'm going to address your question in a second, Ashish. Yeah, so we see that as the parent is light DOM enabled, right? The div that's enclosing the parent is being styled because the parent is light DOM enabled. But for the child components, the product tile components, we disabled light DOM, and now we are using native shadow DOM, right? And because of that, the div is not being styled. So to finish, let's change that, and we're going to revert the product tile, the child component, to be on render mode light. And we're going to refresh. And we are going to see our components. And yes, now the styling is applying to all my individual property tile components because we enable light down for them. This is, they don't have that shadow boundary protection anymore. So this can be useful when you are in Experience Cloud and you want to use a global styling library. We don't recommend to use it in the platform as I explained before. Okay, so with that, I'm going to take a look at one question that was, or two questions that were in the chat. First, Tech Lead Cloud Consulting is asking to make a code live in the LWC CRM Analytics dashboard. I'll take a look at that. I'm not familiar with that topic, but of course I can prepare it. Thank you for the suggestion. And keep giving us suggestions because many times we don't know which topics you are most interested in. Indeed, if you go to LinkedIn and look for my colleague Mohit Srivastava, he's shared survey today asking for suggestion for next year Code Live because he's running Code Lives now. So if you have ideas, make sure to go there, find him, and respond to the survey because it's important. I indeed, let me look for the survey and I'm going to share it here because that way you can give us feedback. Is this one? Okay. So this is the post and I'm going to paste it in the chat window as well. Okay, so you have it. Great. And the other question is about Light DOM, and it's a really good question. So Ashish is asking if the Light DOM elements can be accessed by some global JavaScript library if it is inside of another component with Shadow DOM. And the answer is no, okay? If you want that global JavaScript library to work, you need to have all the components till the top level Light DOM enabled. Because at the moment you have a parent component which is adding a shadow boundary, the library is not going to be able to traverse that, okay? That's the reason I made my product tile component Light DOM enabled, but I also made my product tile list component Light DOM enabled, which is the top level component. Hope that makes sense. And that is a very, very good question. Okay, do you have any more questions on the chat? If not, let me see if there's anything else that I would like to share. Yeah, there is a session that happened at Dreamforce, which is about Experience Cloud, which is Experience Cloud sites with LWR, what developers should know. And I also recommend you to watch it if you are interested. It's like more basic than what we saw today and on the previous week, but it can be helpful if you are interested in that topic. And yeah, and we have one more question in the chat. So Bhaskar is asking, do you need to have both global JavaScript component along with static resource? So the way in which I loaded JavaScript and CSS globally in my example today was using two static resources. But in Experience Cloud, there is a way to do that. Let me see if it's here. Maybe. I don't know exactly where, but I know that there is a way to add styles and JavaScript and JavaScript to the header of the page. Okay, maybe here. I don't know right now where, but I know there is a possibility to add JavaScript, global JavaScript and global CSS to the header, to the head of an LWR site and also to Aura sites. So you don't need to use static resources. That's something that I did because I thought it was the right thing to do. Okay. And then Pedro has another question. Hey, Alba, explaining my problem, I'm using tab component in Experience Cloud, but sometimes this component loads with a margin. Imagine everything a tab component have a margin top. I'm not sure if this is a bug because it's the default component. I was trying to override that class to set this height to static value. Yeah, how render mode? Okay. So Pedro, I don't know if that's a bug. It could be. Why don't you write that in the Trailblazer community and ping me? You write your problem. Try to look for a group that's related. There is an Experience Cloud group, for instance. You can write there and ping me, and that way I can try to find if there is a bug that's logged in or the product manager that can help you with that problem. Okay. And Ashish is asking how render mode and support Shadow DOM are different. Yeah, so this is what probably you missed part of the video. I recommend you to watch it from the beginning, right? Because we've been talking that this property is there to let you pick between native Shadow DOM and synthetic Shadow DOM, and this property is there to help you pick between light DOM and Shadow DOM. If you watch this from the beginning, you will understand what's the difference. Okay. Fantastic. So if there are no more questions, I want to thank you again for being here today. I want to wish you happy holidays for all of you again. And we'll be back we will be back with Code Life very soon. I don't know if there's a Code Life program for next week, but if not, I'm sure that in 2 weeks we will be back. Enjoy the holidays. I hope that you play with these features, and I will paste all the resources in the description of the video, and you can also add comments in there that I will keep watching them. Okay, thank you and very much, and hope to see you next time.